Well, it's gotten to the point where some people will not buy a cartridge with Creedmoor in the name. And despite my attempts to settle once and for all the question of how well I can shoot off of a bench, I'm trying various techniques. I apparently didn't cover them all, and I still need to do more testing. Why don't you guys join me on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast, and we will see if we can settle all of this accuracy business and answer a lot more questions from all of you. We are going to start, as usual, with our patrons, and Mark and I have been conversing quite a bit, and Mark said the 284 and 6 and 6.5 millimeter versions of the 284 Winchester, those are much better than the Creedmoor. I've gotten to the point where I'm starting to hate anything that has Creedmoor in its name, especially when someone tells me that they can kill an elk at 700 yards with their 6.5 Creedmoor. But yet, the old 30-30, the 35 Remington, or even the 32 Special, why, those aren't even capable of killing anything past 75 yards. It makes me so mad. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm thinking any of those others are better at 200 yards than the Creedmoor is at 700 yards. So I wrote back. I said, I feel your pain, Mark, but chill, man. This is just humans being humans. It's the same in every aspect of life. People like to think that their tools, their things define them. My dog's better than your dog. I choose the better boots, the better car, the better golf ball, so you're an idiot and I'm superior. The internet and social media make this grandstanding one-upmanship easy because you can show off, even denigrate the other guy without having to face him. It makes the accuser feel better about himself, but it's no reflection on you or the tools that you've chosen. The important thing is that we don't conflate the cartridges with their advocates or detractors. The 6.5 Creedmoor performance doesn't improve or diminish just because a braggart or a bore misrepresents it. The 35 Remington doesn't bounce off a deer at 150 yards just because Rufus Loudmouth condemns it. It is natural to feel offended by these characters, but it's best to ignore them and assess the cartridge, your bullets, your rifles on their actual performance. Drop, deflection, retained energy, accuracy, terminal performance, all of those things. So cheers, my friend. And Mark wrote back a little bit later and said, hey, in my opinion, the perfect rifle rest is a war bag with a couple of pillows inside. Great for off the bench or on the hood. He must have been referring to that video in which I attempted to determine which bench rest technique provided the most accuracy. And then I wrote him back and quickly said, really, that surprises me, Mark, because I've always found that pillows are too bouncy for a solid platform. Maybe I'm using the wrong stuffing. But hey, if your pillow setup provides a solid, steady support from which you can shoot your best, go for it. By the way, what is your definition of a war bag? And he wrote back and explained it's that canvas duffel bag that soldiers and Navy men carried around. Oh yeah, now I get it. I don't know, they're about 3.5 feet high, and you put all your gear in that soft duffel bag, throw it over your shoulder, and away you go. Stuff that with pillows or just about anything, and you could make a pretty darn good rifle rest. And I equated that when I wrote back to Mark and said it's like my backpacks. When I'm backpack hunting, I have an extra coat in there and enough stuff, enough padding that if I put that backpack down on the ground, I've got a really long surface on which to get a good rest on my rifle. It gives me good lateral stability as well as vertical. So not a bad system, as long as the material inside isn't real spongy and bouncy. All right, here's a patron named Michael. Hey, Ron, about a year ago, you inspired me to get a 375 H&H Magnum. Since then, I have started reloading, and I am impressed with the Hammer 104 monolithics in my 243 Winchester. I was wondering if you've tried any of Hammer's 375s when you're reloading. Michael, yes, I have been reloading the 270 grain Hammer Hunters in my 375 H&H. And I've used them, and I've seen 2 one-shot kills on buffalo, and 1 3-shot kill on buffalo, and 1 was a 1-shot kill on an elephant. And then there was lots of smaller game, but they have really never failed me. And I can drive them at about, I remember right, 2,800, 2,850 feet per second. And that's about 100 feet per second faster than you would usually get from with that bullet weight. So I think the copper bullet with a minimal shank touching the barrel reduces friction and the pressures. You can just push them up a little bit more and get your velocity without getting your pressures too high. Seems to be what's happening with those. And they're wonderfully accurate too. So you folks, if you haven't tried those yet, you might want to give them a try. No, this is I.B. Newton. This gentleman is Newton. And he says, so you deleted my comment because I pointed out that this is not South Africa, but Mozambique? I thought you were an honest channel. Let's see if you'll delete this comment too. Then he edited something and said, I am certain that this is the Maromio Kutata 11 or 12 area on the Zambezi River Delta in Mozambique. I wrote back and said, Newton, I haven't deleted anything. This is the first comment I've seen from you on this thread. But you are correct. This is Zambezi Delta Safaris in Mozambique, where this buffalo hunt in this video took place. The title was supposed to read with a lowercase Southern Africa, not capital South Africa. But it was just a simple mistake, and there is a difference between dishonesty and a simple mistake. So don't get too worked up over it. We're not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes on where we're hunting. It was Zambezi Delta Safaris in the Zambezi Delta of Mozambique. No reason why we'd want to cover that up. Nooi says, I am seeing one thing, and it is repeated in every group of 3 shots. All to the right of the dot. Is it possible that the scope is off and needs some adjustment? Ron, I know you're the expert in the field. When I'm hunting, I focus on my shooting and the element that I am in to be successful. It is never going to be a perfect world. Ron, you're the best. I love your channel. Nooi, this is a common misperception from a lot of shooters. When they see a group off of the aiming point, the bullseye, they think that the shooter's doing something wrong or he doesn't quite understand. This is not what's going on when we're group testing, or at least when I am. I just need the rifle to be somewhere on that paper, relatively close to my aiming point. But if it's 2 inches high and a little bit to the left or right, I don't really care so long as my shots are grouping consistently in that spot. I can always adjust my scope for a perfect hold, perfect shot on target where I want it to be when I have chosen my load and then I'm working up for actual field shooting. So I think that's the mistake you're making on that. Yes, that scope was zeroed with most of the shots landing about an inch to the right, which didn't bother me at all. When I would choose my final load, then I could move it over an inch or whatever was required. But quite often when I am working this way and testing different loads, one will shoot left or right an inch or 2 from the previous load. So I really can't guarantee every time I'm going to be on my aiming point anyway. So it's just looking for good, consistent grouping of all the shots. But a good question. Glad you brought that up because I know a lot of people do mention that from time to time. They're confused about it. All right, this is Molly. I used to use hand on scope as it tightened up the groups with lighter rifles, but I also had point of impact shifts, so I stopped doing it. That is in reference to when I tried holding my hand over the scope, as many people suggested I should do, to control the rifle and get more accurate groups. So the video that these guys are referring to, we covered several different techniques. And some of them, most of them really were sent in by you folks. You said, hey, this is what works for me. You should try it. So we did that. I used my standard technique, which is to have the rifle's forend up in the bag or the tripod on a sandbag or something. And then I control the rear of the bag by squeezing what I call rabbit ears on a little sandbag back there. And that enables me to move it just slightly left or right or up and down for my final shot. And I don't disturb the forend. And I have shot half-inch groups. A few times I've shot quarter-inch groups with the right rifle and the right ammunition. But so often in these test videos that I do, I will have an unknown rifle with unknown ammo, and it just doesn't group all that well. And people think I don't know how to shoot. So we were trying to settle all that stuff, but it looks like we just opened the can of worms even farther, and we've got night crawlers coming out all over now. But the one that a lot of folks like is to hold the hand over the top of the scope, over the turrets. Some of them put it over the objective lens. I tried both. The turret one worked for some pretty tight groups, but they were really no tighter than what I was getting with my old system. But the one over the bell of the scope, that seemed to make things worse. So we're getting comments and things and new tricks. So we might do another one of these videos and try some of these new tricks that people are sending in. So don't hesitate if you think you've got the ultimate winner. And I think we're going to get a few more here the way it looks. This one is from Steve. Says, I've always had my best results with my hand in the scope. And now that's a trick. Dude, I want to know how you get your hand in the scope. I think we're looking at a typo here. I think you hit the I instead of the O for on the scope. But okay, Steve does hand on the scope. But Steve, is that on the bell, the objective bell of the scope, or over the turrets, or maybe even behind them? Because this seems to make a difference from a lot of people. And it sure did for me. I got my best groups when I lightly rested my hand over the turret and tried really hard not to put any pressure. I didn't want to torque it left or right because that can change your impact points. All right, this is from Austin, and he says, you should consider using a decent bipod with a rear bag. That's the one I didn't try. Guys, I don't generally use bipods, attached bipods. I know they're really, really popular, and they are absolutely great for precision shooting in the field from a prone position. But I very rarely do that. There's so many times when I hunt, I just don't have the conditions to use that setup. It's either too steep of a downhill angle or an uphill angle, or I'm on a slope facing down and the animal's on another slope facing up, or there's too much brush and grass in the way. And I just learned that I'll waste my time if I flop prone, fold out those bipod legs, and then say, ooh, I'm looking right at a rock or a bush or something in the way. So I have trained myself to do most of my shooting from a sitting position with portable bipods, little shooting sticks that I carry. And then I can spread those as wide or as shallow as I want. I can lean them forward and backwards to change my elevations. And they're just wonderfully versatile. And they're not adding weight to the front of the rifle. That's the thing I really don't like about bipods. And I understand there are some really nice bipod systems out there that either mechanically or magnetically attach to the fore end. And it might be a bar attachment, it might be a swivel attachment or something. And that's fine. If it works for you guys and you don't mind carrying that stuff around, it is really accurate. But I think I'm going to have to do some shooting groups with that technique. That's one I want to add in for sure. So as I said earlier, keep sending these ideas in and we will list them. I'll make a list and we'll try another episode where I do the precision shooting techniques until we find something that beats my old system. Now, the last time we did this, I shot two different rifles. They were both pretty darn accurate. One was fairly consistently shooting 3/4 inch groups, and the other was a new one to me, but I heard from my friend who owned it and built it that it was really, really accurate. So I was expecting probably 3/4 inch groups or so and got those. I don't remember if the best group was under a half, but we were pretty much in that 0.6 to 0.7 range with most of the ammo. So I think we can do something like that again. This is from user. Says, from my observation, your bench is a little too high for you. I may just shoot strange, but I don't square up on my target, and I target shoot the way that I hunt. If you are in an unnatural stance at the bench, it can cause you to have a big impact shift in hunting stances. Okay, that is a good point, user. What user is saying, and several other people did comment about that, is that you shoot off the bench and find out where your rifle is shooting and you think you're zeroed. And then when you go to the field, you no longer have your bench. You're no longer sitting in a certain position each time. You might be shooting off of a tripod or a bipod or a rock or a fence post or just offhand. And it's not necessarily shooting to the same point of aim. Understood, guys, and that is right. But what I'm doing on this bench testing is I am testing the ammunition, the bullets, the rifle. I want to know what they are capable of, not me. So I'm trying to eliminate my inputs to the rifle. That's why I hold it minimally and try not to move it when I set off that trigger. Once I know that that rifle is capable with the load that I've got of dropping everything into 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch, then I can transition to my field shooting, and I would zero my rifle using probably my most common field shooting, which would be that bipod out front. A good safety check, though, is to have your hand on the fore end of your rifle on whatever else you might be resting on. That gives you that padding for more consistency. If you got your rifle's fore end resting on a harder surface, it might kick higher. during recoil than if it's on a softer surface. And the only soft surface of a consistency that you can carry around with you pretty handily without losing it is your hand. You could say, well, I'm going to use a sock or a small bag, and then turns out you lost it just when you need to make your shot, and you're going to get a different point of impact. So try to keep your hand under whatever it is and shoot that way, and do your final zero with your rifle using your hunting ammo with the techniques you're going to use in the field: sitting, leaning over something, standing, etc., etc. And great advice. So thanks for that one. All right, let's see. These are some that Betsy compiled, so you never know what you're going to get when Betsy compiles things. It depends on how she feels about me this time she put them together. She can get me some really bad ones or some really complimentary ones. So let's see what we get this time. Dave says, "Dang, Ron, you've killed lots of big game far and wide. I'm certain that whatever you have done for all of those years is just fine. So why change? All of my hunting is within 400 yards. The simple bench technique has worked for me for many years." Appreciate that, Dave. It's a good pragmatic answer and approach to hunting, and I kind of the same way. But it's always good to experiment and work with these ideas that other folks have, because kind of the whole point of all this is just to help all of us learn new things or investigate and discover. You never know, you might just get a eureka moment and it solves a problem that you've had has been nagging you for years. So I will always entertain your ideas, guys. Well, here's an easy one from Jake. "Ron, get a bipod! Exclamation point, exclamation point." Once again, I'm not a big bipod fan, but I hear you, Jake. They work really well. In fact, I will say this. I was at a long-range shooting school one time. A bunch of other gun riders and stuff were there. And we were going through the motions so that the school could show us what they did with their regular students, so we could do some advertising for them. Imagine that. It was lots of fun. A lot of my buddies and some really good shooters there. And I am not the world's greatest shooter, but what we were doing is a contest at 600 yards on various sized targets. Started with the big one and then worked our way down. And when you got a miss, you were out. Who was going to go through the string? As I recall, and anybody who was there with me might back me up on this one, or they might call me out, but I am not making this up and lying, but I got all of the targets and I was the only one who did. But I sort of cheated, and here's how. I hung back and I watched the other guys and their shots, and I learned what the wind deflection was doing to their bullets. They were hitting the edges of the target, and they were just off to the left side, so I thought I better be looking for a pretty stiff right to left wind, and it looks like it's blowing those bullets about 6 inches or so. So when it came time for me to get down to those tinier targets, I can't remember if the last one was a 6-inch target, I think. So I had that was probably what it was. A 6-inch target at 600 yards. That's pretty tiny. But I knew enough to hold about 5 inches off to the right side of it, and the wind blew it right in. And I got all my targets and nobody else did. So sometimes I can shoot, but I was using a bipod. So you got it, Jake. We all were lying on mats with a bipod pro and perfect setup. The point again is that's great for target shooting, but I don't see it very often in the hunting fields. All right, now the practical rifleman might have some advice for me here. He is an F-class shooter. I can tell you that pressure on the scope can cause impact shifts. You should adjust the front rest so that you don't have to rely on muscle input on the rear bag. A good affordable rest is the Bald Eagle from Grizzle Tool. I'm not familiar with this one. Grizzle, Grizzle. I don't know if that is spelled correctly or not, but you guys can check it out. The Bald Eagle rest, I think I've heard of that one. And he says another one is Shade Tree Engineering for a good package. All right, some good advice from Practical Rifleman about a really effective upfront rest. I'm not so sure I agree with what he said about the rear bag. No muscle input on the rear bag. Yeah, I don't know if it's really muscle input. I mean, obviously it is if I'm squeezing the bag, but I can just make such fine adjustments by doing that, and it doesn't seem to wiggle or wobble the sighting picture at all. So I just get pretty much with a natural hold on target. I want that rifle to be on the rest, pointing at my bullseye, but it might be an inch too low or an inch to the left or something, and I just squeeze that bag in the back tiny bit until the crosshair comes right to the center, and then I squeeze off my shot. and I'm calling my shots. I'm not jerking the trigger. I'm going, now this is perfectly steady, or I can see my heartbeat and notice that I might be moving an eighth of an MOA on my target grid. So I'm watching what's going on, and it seems to be pretty consistent. But I'm not an F-class shooter, so Practical Rifleman might have the better idea. Here is something from Percher. Ron, is your rear bag flat for a target stock, or is it angled for most hunting stocks? It's angled this way. So if the bag is got the two rabbit ears up like this, the back of the bag tapers just the same as the stock of my hunting rifles. So they can slide down it and or not even touch it, really. So that's that question. Now, you look real uncomfortable controlling elevation using a bull bag or a rest with the hand on the scope, not able to squeeze the rear bag. Yes, that is true. What Perter means there is that when I was shooting with my forend in the bags, the big bull bags, the heavy ones, I was having trouble controlling it. It would slide too far down in the bags, or the bags would flare out, and it would shift to the side, and I just never have enjoyed those bull's bags. Maybe I don't know how to properly use them, but it was a half-size bag, so it didn't have the mass of the full-sized ones and really settle in nicely. So I was having some issues with that. But when I took my shots, it was holding steadily. It just took me extra time to set up those shots, and that's what I didn't enjoy. All right, so he continues. To make that work, you need a sloped rear bag that rides on the slope of the stock. Got that one, checked that off. The elevation is controlled by sliding it forward or backwards, just like one adjusts an old iron rear sight with a parallel ramp. I always enjoy your videos. Greetings from South Africa. Yeah, that's right, Perter. You slide it up and down. So if your stock line on the bottom is like this, and your bag is slanted the same way, you can slide it up and down on a ramp, which is what I'm doing, but I'm just doing that final little tweak with a little squeeze there. It doesn't amount to usually more than about a half MOA. All right. Good advice, guys. Keep it coming. We're going to get this all figured out. That's probably all of them on how to use bench rest techniques for accuracy. So I want to sum this up. In that video, what I determined through all of my shooting was that there was no significant difference in group sizes with any of the techniques. In fact, to my surprise and delight, my old technique shot the tightest group. Now, it was just one 3-shot group, so it could have been a fluke, but the idea that I was picking up on was that as long as whatever shooting technique you're using gives you consistent groups with a known quantity rifle and ammo, really, what else do you need? Obviously, if you're trying to enter a bench rest precision shooting competition and drop all of your bullets into one hole, you're going to want the absolute finest. And then I think you're going to be spending hundreds of dollars on the proper front end rests and bags and everything else. That stuff has been figured out for quite a long time by these kinds of shooters. But for someone like me, a casual shooter, hunter, plinker, just somebody who enjoys his rifles and is satisfied knowing that they shoot inch groups, half-inch groups, not necessarily a 0.110-inch group. These techniques seem to work fairly well, equally well. But the final answer, again, is once you know how well your rifle shoots and or you're satisfied with how it's grouping with your hunting ammo, then it is time to make your final zero and get into the field shooting positions. And we will probably be doing some more videos on field shooting. We've done some in the past where we demonstrated shooting sticks from different positions on hillsides and stuff, prone in the grass and whatever. We'll get into some more of that stuff because that's really where the rubber meets the road, guys. You've got to be able to perform and drop your bullets on target every time to whatever distance you can do that from a field position. It might be cold. It might be windy. You might be miserable and shaking. You might be tired from walking all day. You might have just made a burst of speed to cut something off and you're gasping for breath. Boy, that's going to change a lot of stuff. And as many people have said, you're not going to have tripod rests and bench rests and sandbags. So this is somebody with no name who says, I feel like your rationale for 3-shot groups being sufficient for a hunting rifle doesn't really make sense. Appropriate group size to assess realistic MOA capability has nothing to do with how many shots you are anticipating putting on target. setting aside concerns for barrel heating. The point is that 3-shot groups just don't provide enough statistical significance to determine whether or not a gun is truly MOA. You went on to note that multiple 3-shot groups would probably be sufficient, which, sure, it probably is, as that is giving you the equivalent of a 10 or 15-shot group. Hornady's video series on this does a good job explaining why individual 3-shot groups can really steer people in the wrong direction about the capability of their rifle. And I agree. The 3-shot group is not going to tell you that your rifle is now an MOA rifle because you got one 3-shot group to go inside of an inch at 100 yards. That's minute of angle. Yeah, your next 3-shot group might go out. So then what do you have? Is it an 1.5-inch gun, an inch gun? And my point was, as a hunter, I am rarely shooting more than 3 times an animal. So that's what I want to know my rifle can do. What will it do with 3 shots as quickly as I can fire them, or relatively quickly? So I don't have to worry about cold barrel, clean barrel, and all the rest of it. It's just, I'm hunting, I'm shooting at this deer, I need to shoot 3 times. I'd like to know where my bullet's landing. It's going to stay inside of that little circle. So that's why I think it's valid if every time you take a 3-shot group, you still get that size. If the one time you do a 3-shot group and you get a 1/2 inch, oh boy, I got a half MOA rifle. The next time out, you get an 1.5 inch. Do you have a inch MOA rifle? No, it's already proven that it can go 1.5 inch. So keep doing it. Are you going to get a 2-inch someday? Man, if you do 10 3-shot groups over time, you'll get a really good idea of what your rifle is consistently capable of doing. That's what you need to keep locked in your head. But the caveat I would throw on that one is that you don't really need a rifle that can group everything in a half MOA or whatever wonderful precision we would like. Because in hunting, with what people have already mentioned about field positions, and you're never going to be able to match up to what you can do on the bench, although we'd like to try, we should. But it's just that the targets are so much bigger. We're generally shooting at an 8 to 10 inch vital zone. And while I agree, it's nice to know that your bullet is going to go precisely where you aim it every time. If you're off by an inch or two, you've still got a vital hit on your animal. And I think we need to just keep that in mind. If we spend all of our time worrying about a 1/4 MOA rifle and not practicing our field shooting positions and really being effective, I don't think it's the right way to go. I think we're done with those, and we get to go to the magical, mystical, computerized questions here that I haven't seen before. Let's see what the team has put together this time. I put together something I can't read. Oh, there it is. Jim. Jim is from Georgia. Welcome, Jim. I hope the peaches are ripe down there. You're probably past ripe already in Georgia. Ooh, Georgia peaches. What a deal. Love them. Hey, Ron, I have been watching you and Jim over at Backfire a lot lately. You guys really break firearms down in an entertaining and educating way. So thank you. Well, appreciate that. And I think on behalf of Jim, I'll say thank you. But my question for you, Ron, is a 2-part. How well do you believe the new Christensen Arms Evoke Hunter will perform in terms of accuracy? I am looking into it as a potential new rifle, so my brother and I don't have to share one anymore. That's a good point. And number 2, this Evoke Hunter is not chambered in 7 Rem mag. It's available in a 300 Win Mag, 300 PRC, 7 PRC, 655 PRC. And he wants this rifle to be a step up from a 308 that he's been sharing with his brother. And he wants to be capable of taking most North American game. So he wants to pick my brain, that shouldn't take long, about both the gun and what caliber you recommend. Okay, little problematic lately on those Christensen Arms. I've been hearing a lot of folks saying they're just not accurate anymore. And we tested one in 30-06 week that definitely wasn't. But we had them build it for us really quickly. They didn't have any in stock because most guys nowadays are ordering what you're mentioning here, the 7 PRCs and the 6.5s and maybe the 300s. 3-06 is just grandpa's hunting rifle. So they, slapped it together or hurried it together, but the upshot was it was not up to snuff. And when I told them, they said, oh gosh, you give us another crack at it because we got something wrong here we need to make right. And I credit that to them as being willing to do this for their customers. I assume they would do this for a regular customer as well. I certainly hope so. But they took the rifle back, found out there were some things wrong with it, and We're going to fix that and send it back. And I just heard from them the other day that it's ready to go and they're going to be sending it. So we will be doing another video review. I don't remember if it was the Evoke model though, but I don't know that should make a difference. Generally what these companies do, they've got the same action and they'll swap out the stock and the barrel and change it up and give it a different name. So you might have a long-barreled Ridge Runner and a shorter-barreled Woods gun or something. I'm not sure which one the Evoke is, but I would assume, I don't know how it's going to perform in accuracy, but a semi-custom rifle like that should at least shoot sub-MOA. But talk to the manufacturers at Christensen and just tell them what your concerns are and ask them what sort of guarantees they've got. Can you send it back if it's not up to snuff? I'm sure they're going to build you one that does what you need it to do, but check with them. They're the ones who are responsible for this. I would imagine, though, that it would work out really well for you in most of the chamberings that you mentioned. Now, much as I love the 7-rem mag, again, it's an older cartridge chambered in hunting rifles, and these days everyone wants precision, which is why these precision target shooting rifles and calibers cartridges, like the PRCs and 6.8 Western and all these new ones, those are set up for precision target shooting. Why not use them for hunting? On the other side, the old ones, which are perfectly fine for decades and decades as hunting rifles, can be made to shoot well as a target rifle, but you're going to have to hand load for them. They were not set up from the get-go to be perfect for target shooting. So you have to sometimes even throat them a little bit longer with a gunsmith doing some chamber work, or load your bullets out a little farther and different things. So I think it's a good system if you want to do some really precision shooting. Pick one of the PRC versions up rather than the old 300 Win Mag or 7-rem mag and that sort of thing. So the caliber that I recommend for all-around hunting, as many know, it's the 7-rem mag. You can't find that one. I think the 7 PRC is a perfectly suitable substitute. It might not be shooting quite as fast. It should. It has the powder capacity and the ability to do it. Some factory loads are meeting the advertised velocities. Some are not. The Hornady one we've covered many times, having some issues with that, but it's still a precision shooter. And I found that in the rifle I was shooting, the factory loads were going 2850 to 2950 sometimes, in that range. So you know what you're going to get pretty much from that. Go with the 300 Win Mag. That's been around the world multiple times and done everything. The 300 PRC should do the same thing. The 6.5 PRC is getting a little bit onto the light side. I don't have a problem with it for deer, pronghorn, sheep, goats, anything in that size range, going to work just fine. Elk, I think with the right bullet, it's going to do just fine, and I wouldn't hesitate to use it on moose. But again, you're getting into that 150 grain top end sort of a bullet size, and might be considered a little light for elk and up for a lot of people. I'm more the way of thinking, if it's the right bullet and you put it in the right place, it really doesn't matter all that much. So if you want a little bit less recoil, 6.5 PRC, especially if you'll mainly be using it for pronghorn, whitetail, mule deer, and that sort of thing. If you mainly want an elk rifle, you'll also be doing some deer hunting with it, one of the 7s or the 300s would be probably perfect. So, yeah, I didn't answer your question exactly, partner, but I think you can understand. You've got to make the final choice, Jim. But good luck with that one. I think any of them will do just fine for you. And let us know how it works out if you talk to Christensen Arms, like I think you should. Let us know what they said, and then if you get that rifle, and tell us how it shot for you. And I am looking forward to getting this 30-06 back so we can run it through its paces and see how well it shoots now that they've fixed it up. All right, we're going to go to North Carolina, where Cameron is asking something about a Mauser. This could be interesting. In regards to the Mauser versus Krag, well, we could argue until the cows come home about weapon technology and staying in your lane, but the mind of a sportsman is more like a country road. I got to start this over. This is interesting. A little bit of spelling issues going on here, typing issues, but okay, in regards to the Mauser versus Krag, this is back to a podcast I did where someone told me that I had my historical information about the 3040 Krag U.S. military rifle wrong, and I should lay off history because I didn't know what I was talking about, and I should stay in my lane, which would be like talking about cartridges, right? Well, that's what I thought the 3040 Krag was, but I mentioned some history with the Spanish-American War and got it wrong. At any rate, that's what Cameron is talking about. In regards to that, while we could argue till the cows come home about weapon technology and staying in your lane, the mind of a sportsman is more like a country road. There are no lanes. It's just a well-worn path and a few pull-offs here and there where you fish and you hunt. So sure, there might be some rubbish on the side, but I'll take those winding roads over a lane any day. Keep up the great writing and education. Well, Cameron, I appreciate that. And that's an interesting comparison there, a little metaphor. We hunters and shooters aren't racing down an interstate lane. We are meandering through the woods on little trails, and we sometimes get off on a side trail and explore it a little bit and learn something new. You will find me literally out in the woods smelling the roses. I will get down on my hands and knees and look at a wildflower that I have not seen before, or get on my belly to photograph a mushroom. Anything that piques my interest. Just because I'm in the hunting lane doesn't mean I can't veer off my little country trail. Good point, Cameron. I appreciate that. Paver, Johannesburg. Hey, we're going to South Africa here. What does Paver have to say? Ron, I love your show. I'd love to know your thoughts on the Winchester XPR rifle. I have recently purchased one in .300 Winchester Magnum. After some extensive research, I thought it was the most versatile for anything other than dangerous game. If I enjoy my first hunt, then maybe a .375 will be next, depending on where I want to hunt. So let me know your thoughts. Thanks, Praver. Yeah, 300 Win Mag is a world beater. I will often vacillate between my favorite 7 Rem Mag all around and that 300, because really the 300 should be more versatile than the 7 because you can shoot heavier bullets. I have just never found that it was necessary to shoot those heavier bullets. So why put up with the extra weight and recoil? Not that it's that big of a deal, but well, yeah, you're going to be well served by that 300 Win Mag. And your 375 H&H or any of the other 375s in that category, there aren't very many of them, but there are some good ones, will do just fine. That's just another world beater. So I think you're going to do just great with that. Now, in the Winchester XPR rifle, you no longer have the famous Winchester Model 70 controlled round feed dangerous game rifle setup. This is a push feed action, but it's a quick, short bolt lift. If I remember right, it's got 3 lugs up front and surprisingly accurate for this is sort of a starter rifle, a budget rifle. But they've been, golly, how many years have this been out now? This probably been 10 years or more. And I used to shoot those on the whitetail shows I did on TV that Winchester sponsored. And for a couple seasons there, I was shooting those XPRs, and they were just shooting lights out. Really pretty impressive stuff. So, yeah, I think you're going to do just great with that. Just know that you've got a push feed action rather than a controlled round feed. But plenty of hunting has been done in Africa with push feed actions. It's not as big a deal as a lot of people like to make it out to be. All right, Cam from Northern Illinois. Thank you, Mr. Spomer, for your work. I am the father of 2 boys. The oldest is 11. My little helper has grown from following me around like a shadow to preferring the company of his friends. Such is the normal course of life. We still enjoy time shooting and bonding, but just not as frequently as when he was younger. However, lately, whenever we are in the car, he'll ask, "Hey, can we listen to that guy who talks about hunting and guns?" He frequently pauses to share his opinions or asks questions. So you are fueling some incredibly wholesome moments between a father and a son. Thank you very much for that. All the best, Cam. Oh, that's one of those heart thumpers, Cam. Oh, I'm glad I can entertain both you and your son and help you with that bonding. Yeah, it is tough when they start approaching those teen years. They don't like to have mom and dad hanging around quite so much as they used to. Their friends sort of take over as the answers to everything. But fortunately, we all get over that eventually. All right, Arkansas, Barry. This is interesting. Barry spells his name like a bear, Bearrie. I've not seen that before, but for a hunter, I think that's a good spelling for Barry. Mr. Spomer, first, I would like to say thanks for all of your content that you and your wife, along with Covey, good dog, are making. Covey's outside now. Sorry, guys. It is great. I am wanting your opinion on the Ruger #1 in .458 Winchester Magnum. Whoa. I had a chance to purchase one at great price. I couldn't turn it down. I have been wanting a 458 Win Mag for some time now, as I plan to go to Africa with it in the next couple of years hunting no elephant. And I wanted to start shooting the rifles that I plan to take so I could be as proficient as possible with them. One is a Browning X-Bolt 375 H&H, and now this Ruger #1. Now, what type of scope would you recommend? Or should I get a peep sight or a red dot? I can't see iron sights like I used to. What bullet type and weight? And would I be better off to get a bolt action instead of this single shot? Thanks for your time and reading this. I look forward to all of the Ron Spomer Outdoor videos. Best regards, Barry. Yeah, Barry, a 458 Win Mag is so much fun. You are going to really enjoy that. Obviously, that's your Buffalo outfit, right? And I think the reason you found one used for a great price is because what happens is folks like us have that dream hunt for the big buffalo or the elephant or something in Africa where we need that big special rifle. So we buy it and we do the hunt, and then we sit there at home looking at it for a few years and realize, I don't know that I'm ever going to shoot that again. So they go on the market, and there are many fewer people who are in the market for that sort of a rifle and then your standard deer and elk cartridges. So you can get good prices quite often. So what are you going to aim that thing with? I don't think, given you can't see your iron sights like you used to, neither can I wouldn't even go with iron sights anymore, maybe out to 30 yards. I can shoot fairly well with a 22 rimfire yet with open sights, but a peep sight makes it a lot better. Skinner Sights sent me a peep for my Henry lever action 22, and boy, did that make a difference. But I don't think I want a peep on that Ruger for a dangerous game hunt. I would stick with a scope. The red dot could be really effective inside of 50 yards, maybe out to 80. You might even get away with it at 100. But what happens, of course, is that dot is a certain diameter. It covers things up at distance. The further you get out, the more the red dot covers. Shouldn't be an issue against the red or the black hide of a big old buffalo. But for smaller things, you start covering up too much. Something to think about. But boy, for quick access inside of 80 yards or so, you throw that up and that red dot is just right there. And you don't have to have your eye perfectly aligned behind it. You don't have any parallax issues with them. So you can throw that up and get a shot off really quickly. That's one of the selling points of a red dot. So that is that option. But with the single shot rifle, I think you're going to be taking your time aiming, right? You're not going to be snap shooting with that unless you have to on a charge. So that suggests you do want a scope for precision shot placement. You want to make that one shot count. So while you're fishing for your second shot and Mr. Buffalo is charging you, not the best setup. So the single shot dangerous game hunters are generally being backed up by their PH. In case something goes south, I've seen guys with bolt action rifles who couldn't get a second round in a chamber out of a magazine, let alone do a falling block single shot loading. So yeah, strive for precision and accuracy. I would get a 1 or a 1.5 or a 2x scope zooming up to 6 or 8. That will give you all the magnification you need and yet be more than low powered enough to see a buffalo charging at close range, like 10 yards. You're still going to see him in that 2x scope and get your shot on him. So that's what I would recommend. And don't get too big of a objective lens either. Really, diameter of your main tube is probably good enough. You just don't need those big old bells up front. They just get in the way. All right. Daniel from Austin, Texas. All my exes live in Texas. Ron, I love your show, your content, your knowledge, and everything you do for the hunting community. Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. One question that has always plagued me is how bullet and cartridge developers and manufacturers arrive at such a specific grain weight. For example, 168 grain, 123 grain, 124, 147, 110, 125, 130, 150. I'm just wondering if you have ever known the reason behind why such specific choices in weight. One may assume it's just the most optimal bullet. However, most cartridges have more than one option. So what's going on? Thanks in advance. Boy, Dan, I'm going to have to guess at this one myself. Why does one manufacturer offer a 130 grain bullet and another guy in the same caliber has 129 grain? It could be that they make that first bullet of a certain length and general weight. Like say they're designing a bullet for the 270. Well, they know that the 130 grain bullet in 270 is kind of the standard. That's where it made its reputation. So they want to get into that ballpark. But they want to have a little sleeker nose, a secant ogive, and maybe an 11-degree boat tail or something for a higher BC bullet in that weight category. So they build that roughly, and turns out it weighs 129 grains or 135 grains or something a little bit different. But beautifully accurate. It's got just the shape and form and everything that they want, and it stabilizes nicely in the standard twist rates, and they go, okay, let's just go with it. That might be going on. I won't swear to it, but makes sense. Another option might be that they start off with a certain weight in mind. They make that weight, and then they find out it's not shooting all that well, and they sculpt it a little bit differently, and then realize, oh, I guess instead of a 130 grain bullet, we now have 127. But man, is it accurate? Let's just go with it. Maybe that's going on. Another possibility might be they make the bullet, and it does everything they need, got the right shape and all the rest of it, and it weighs exactly what they wanted when they started, but then they decide, boy, this would make a great hollow point. And they remove some lead from the nose, and suddenly they lost some weight there. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but that's the best I can come up with. Anyone else out there know the answer to this? Why do we have 130 grains, 145 grains, 150 grains, 155 grains, 160 grains in a 270? Why don't they all stick with the same numbers? I don't know. Good question. You guys are thinking out there. You just never know what you're going to come up with next. I love it. How about Dave from Fort St. John? Ron, I've hunted the Rocky Mountain elk for 19 years, and I've had the pleasure of harvesting many other big game animals as well. I have found that no matter what rifle I use, 7mm Remington with 7mm Weatherby, 338 Win, 308 Norma, 300 Weatherby, none of these big old boys have dropped when I've shot them. Every animal has been shot between 25 and 40 yards in the heart or lung area so as not to damage the meat. The first bullet I shot in my current hunting area took two 160 grain partitions from my 7mm Weatherby at 3,300 feet per second at 30 yards, and it stood there at the first shot as if nothing happened. The little spruce tree behind him folded over and died. I thought that I'd missed. The elk spun around the other way, so I hit him again. He ran away into the bush at a 45-degree angle, and I didn't want him to get away. As the sun was going down, I didn't want to have to blood track at night, so I shot him behind the ear as he ran, and he dropped. A good shot there, buddy. I was so lucky to get one more shot because we hunt in thick timber. Well, we finished packing him out at 1 a.m., and we found 2 bullet holes in both lungs. Now, another one, I shot a moose 2 years ago, a very large bull with my 338 and a 230 grain Norma Oryx, and he dropped in his tracks at 95 yards. This was also shot in the lungs. Last year, boy, we're going to get a lot of hunting stories here. Woo, they're going on and on. I hope you guys are enjoying this. We're going to find out exactly what Dave has shot. Last year, my partner shot a bull elk at 25 yards with his 300 WSM. 180 grain TSX bullet, and the elk never even flinched. Ran 25 yards and stopped when I cow called. And then my partner shot again, took off running again. The blood trails on these elk have been typical as well. A fairly good-sized puddle where the initial shot was, and then only a drop every 10 yards or so. We had to track one in 2020 that ran into the bush, and we had to track him for an hour because the blood was so hard to spot on the leaves. We eventually found him lying in the bush, hard to see, but the antlers were sticking up. I've read a lot of stories of a lot of different elk dropping right away. I just haven't ever seen it happen, and this is after seeing about a dozen animals harvested. Do you think this is just an elk thing? I have harvested mule deer with a 22-250, and they've dropped in their tracks. Actually, pretty much all of the game has dropped for me. These elk critters seem like they have a will to live like nothing else. They say that an animal won't run up a hill when he's wounded either, and I've seen this happen. Not a steep hill, but a hill nonetheless. I was always taught to shoot tight behind the front shoulder, but I am starting to wonder if there's another spot to choose to drop them in their tracks, or if we should just keep doing like we're doing. I know they will eventually expire due to a blood loss and the inability to breathe, but I would never want to lose an elk. Do you think that this has to do with the rut when they have hormones making them do things that they usually wouldn't? Upshot. I've always wondered about this stuff, and I was curious if you have some knowledge on this subject. I'm usually pretty savvy with figuring things out like this, but I am lost. I appreciate your videos, and I've learned a lot watching your series. Dave. Yo, Dave, good job of outlining what so many of us see in our hunting. I do the same things. I see the same things. I'm right there with you. And I have explained it many, many times before. Richard Mann put me onto this years and years ago. He said, you know why deer and elk and whatever we shoot die? And I never really thought about it. Obviously, we put a hole in the vital organs and they die. But the real reason is when we do that, they lose blood pressure. The heart, lungs, the pulmonary system, cardiopulmonary system is designed to pick up oxygen in blood and run it up to the brain to feed the brain cells. And they have to keep a certain pressure up or their animal will faint. People who faint, you had insufficient pressure, your brain went woo-woo, and you fainted. Well, when you let the air out, as we say, with a lung puncture, you've created hemorrhaging. Not only the air is out of the lungs, but they're bleeding internally. Same with a heart shot. Well, you don't need to be breathing every split second or having your heart beat every split second in order for your brain to still be functioning. So what happens when you damage those vital organs, they're vital over the long term, fairly short long term, but still you don't immediately get the death of the animal. If you hit them in the brain or the spine, the spinal column, pretty much from over the top of the shoulders forward, you do get lights out. That is a central nervous system disconnect. Back in the old days, we used to say it's like pulling the plug on a light or a piece of machinery. It's running full speed and boom, I unplugged it. But not with the heart and lung shot. Sometimes, but usually not. So what is happening, and you should expect this, is you're going to take out those vital organs and they're going to require a little bit of time for that animal to bleed out. And that's why you're seeing them run off or acting like they weren't even hit. And I've seen it all. It's just some really crazy stuff that happens out there. So expect it. And that's part of being a hunter. It's not just the ability to go out and shoot something. You should be able to track it. We should be able to do some tracking before the animal is shot. And after the animal is shot, we should definitely be able to track it. And be persistent. Yes, a lot of times you'll get that initial splash of blood. And then what happens is the blood is filling the chest cavity or the body cavity. And until it gets up to where that bullet hole is, you're not going to have blood coming out or not much. So those are things you learn over time as a hunter. So develop your skills, be a Daniel Boone, shall we say, and learn to read sign, follow scuff marks in the leaves where they're running, and of course the blood trail itself. And then use common sense to think where they're going to go, which is what you were sort of alluding to with your uphill business. Yeah, I've seen vitally shot animals go uphill too. And it's the same thing as when you shoot them and they don't respond, they just stand there or they take off running. They're still pretty much fully functional yet. They've got the blood pressure, the brain cells are working well if the heart and lungs aren't, and they will run uphill if that looks to them like the best place to escape. It's when they get tired and wounded that they don't go uphill. So that's why you'll see them start to wobble or go in a half circle and then fall over. They're starting to lose consciousness. That's pretty much the explanation as best I know it, guys. Now, there, of course, pops up that hydrodynamic kill stuff that people talk about, where, yes, I shot him in the heart and lungs, didn't hit any major bones or structures, didn't hit the central nervous system, instantly gone. Hydrostatic shock. And exactly what's going on there, we just don't have a real solid answer for. But it seems to be that if you make that shot in the heart, lungs, especially the heart, right at the systolic beat of the heart, when it's out beating to send blood up, it's got the peak pressure, and you add the pressure of that bullet hitting, and it bursts blood vessels in the brain. And Nurse Betsy is shaking her head. Is that diastolic?
Yeah.
Betsy says that's the diastolic pressure. And Betsy was an emergency nurse, so she knows her stuff. So the diastolic pressure is the peak. No, now she says she doesn't know her stuff.
Yes, I think you're out of your lane.
Nah, she said I'm out of my lane. I'm out of my lane, guys. At any rate, it's that peak pressure of the heartbeat sending the blood to the brain, and then the bullet hits it and increases it, and then you get a stroke, a rupture of the blood vessels in the brain. There's a little bit of evidence for that. And that's what's going on there. Boy, Betsy, I don't know, between you and me, we're going to get this stuff right. Or die trying. Let's go to Gerard in Canada. Ron, I love your videos and podcasts, but I am a bit confused on this email that I received. Said, Weatherby M307 accuracy test / what's wrong with this falling black single shot? I watched the video, but it looked like a bolt action, not a falling block. Am I missing something? Yeah, I think you're missing the falling block single shot. I'm not exactly sure what this email is. Sounds like one of these auto-generated things that the team puts out to alert people to what our recent videos are. It might have been our weekly newsletter, which just sort of says, hey, here's the latest from Ron Spomer Outdoors, a podcast on this topic, regular broadcast on this topic, something like that. So I think they were referring to 2 different videos there. But I don't even see those, so I don't know exactly what's going on. Sorry about that, Gerard. All right, looks like our final is from Don Coleman. Oops. Now it looks like our final is from Don in Texas. Ron watched your channel. I watch it all the time. I'm concerned about YouTube removing you and all the other channels that I watch. I'm a longtime shooter and I enjoy several other channels also. Where can we go if YouTube does away with all the fun? That's a valid concern, Don. This pops up every once in a while. YouTube decides to tighten down restrictions and stuff on content. So you can't show people how to build firearms. You can't show people how to make explosive devices and all sorts of things like that, some of which pretty practical, reasonable, and sensible. But then sometimes they get a little bit, it seems like it's a little too much. And I can remember several years ago, Hickok 45 got banned for some content that they interpreted was dangerous or something. And there was such an uproar from so many millions of his fans that they reinstated him. So they're always sort of tweaking and tuning, and just recently, they tightened things down again, so there's a lot of concern about, gee, will we have our videos removed? And what happens if they finally decide firearms are the ultimate evil in the world and we need to eliminate all of them? I don't know, guys. We worry about it as well. But YouTube is such a massive presence that you're watching it, we're broadcasting on it. So you can't just walk away from it or you're going to lose your audience. The audience is going to lose the videos. But we do have a solution, guys. RSOTV. That is our private video service on Ron Spomer Outdoors, where you get all of our videos, all of our podcasts, and some that don't appear on YouTube, and you don't get any ads. Unless I'm saying something like, this is our Alaska knife of the week. And it is, only it's not a knife, it's a saw. But I like my kinds of advertisements. I think they're pretty useful. Guys, if you don't carry a saw in the woods when you're hunting, you might be missing out. I find a saw to be really, really useful. It's one thing to chop down a tree, but I can very quietly saw limbs off and open a lane up for shooting with a saw. So you might want to consider something like this saw from Knives of Alaska. This is called the Knives of Alaska wood saw. Can you believe it? It's a wood saw, and you can wear it on your belt like a regular knife. But at any rate, ads like that will be on RSO TV. So if you guys want to make sure you're going to see all of the RSO videos and podcasts, go to ronspomeroutdoors.com and join RSO TV. We're going to do more videos on there that can't be shown on YouTube channels anyway, so you're going to pick up a few extras. Now, it does cost you some money, $5 a month. But for me, spending $5 to not have to see ads on videos sounds like a pretty good deal. So maybe we'll see you there. Time for Commenter of the Week. And I think, Betsy, the commenter of the week that I like was Cameron from North Carolina, I think he was, talking about the country roads. That was a cool little analogy. We'll call it a metaphor. Hunters don't go down the interstate lanes. We meander through the woods on trails, and they have many little side trails that we experiment with and discover new things. So I would say, guys, if you're out there in the woods enjoying your hunting and shooting, don't stay in your lane. Get off the beaten path and discover something new, like Cameron from North Carolina. Hey, this is Ron Spomer. I appreciate you listening, and we will see you all next week. Hunt honest and shoot straight.